In this episode of Curious Explorers, join me and Kathy as we talk about deathbed visions and visitations. They're more common than you might think. So, we unpack a little bit about what those might mean. We share some pretty moving personal stories and much more. So, if you're curious, if this sounds interesting to you, stay tuned. Hey, Kath.
Hey, Trace. It is funny.
Here,
You know what I always laugh about is, and I'm Kathy.
I know. It's very
It's
serious.
so,
I'm Kathy.
and I'm Kathy. It's so
Yes.
like newscaster.
Inspector
Yeah,
Kathy.
exactly. Not
I
to
don't
be
Professor
confused with
Kathy.
someone else. I'm Kathy.
This is Walter Cronkite.
It's like the Pink Panther. I'm Kathy.
So I see that you've been, and I don't even have to point it out that you've been in a peppy mood, I can see.
Yeah. Oh, I guess. I guess.
Despite the cold, despite here I am, using my little Palo Santo to get my mood back up, and you're like, I just came prepared.
No, well, it's funny. I had somebody come in the shop the other night. I'm very rarely in there, but from time to time I am. And he actually came in looking for Palo Santo because he bought something from an antique store in, I want to say, like Washington State. I think he said Oregon, so I don't know,
Okay.
someplace.
One of those
Seattle.
places.
He said Seattle. Okay, so and he brought it back, and he was like, he's, I think it was a jacket, and he said ever since he got he can't sleep, and he was panic stricken. He was like, my heart, I feel like something
Ooh,
is choked. And he's like, and I associate it with this jacket. And I said,
did he wash it?
no. Well,
Sometimes the answer is simple.
he was, no, he was like, I don't even keep it in the room, like it's in the basement. He's like, but there's something that was attached to it. And I was like, a lot of times when you start to think something is the cause, you start kind of giving it power and giving it strength, like a
Yeah.
curse, like a curse doesn't work if you don't tell someone that you curse them. There's going to be a lot of people who say I'm wrong, and okay.
I don't know. I think you can curse somebody anyway.
You
That's
can
the
curse them,
position I'm
but I
taking.
don't know that it works,
I guess we'll have
but
to try it out.
I'll tell you, there's a few people on Capitol Hill I've been doing that to for a long time. It hasn't worked.
I
So
think they're weakening,
yeah, no,
Kathy.
we'll see. But he came in looking for that, and I said, well, why didn't you use sage? And he was like, I tried sage, it didn't work. So he's like, I'm going to throw everything at it.
The big guns.
I said, bring it
Oh
in
my
here with
god,
the
I have a
for it.
story about that. Would be a total tangent from what we're gonna talk about, so I don't know if I should save it for the haunted
Oh, go,
space.
go.
Go? Yeah, so anyway, for people who are just listening, I just use some Palo Santo, and I do think it, if nothing else, the resinous aroma, I think, helps me shift into a better place. But yeah, you and I have talked about this. Our listeners who are new may not know, but I've lived in a bunch of places that I would say there's something active. I guess we would say it would be haunted. I don't think it's just residual. I think I've been in places where there's something residual, but we moved into a place. I'm hesitant. I don't think they listen to this podcast. I'm always wondering if I'm going to get caught one day like, I listened to your podcast and now I'm concerned. But a place we lived in, we moved in, and we had a lot of conflicted feelings about where we were. You know what I'm talking
Mhm.
about. Within the first week, I mean, first of all, within the first day, the basement, and I know everybody says basements are creepy. I know you and Adam did a whole episode on this on his Haunted Life podcast, and it's true. They're creepy, but we like even Jason, who's a lot more resistant to it's haunted during the day, like you could feel something behind you. You could feel something cold and prickly. Like it didn't matter if it was daylight coming in, through the little windows. It was awful. And I mean, this is a creepy story. There was like this weird, huge stain in the middle of the rug in this one room that had been used as another bedroom. So that's a bad sign anyway. Um,
But this was an old and historic place too. So there could have
no,
been.
this was not
Oh, oh,
historic.
oh, 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 okay.
Is the other one.
Right.
People are like, "What is she talking about?" But
She
during the
gets
day,
chased around by
I
ghosts.
know I do. I attract like Kathy also attracts. Kathy attracts people giving her weird crap that's terrifyingly haunted
And I'm
and
like,
has a
throw it in
bad
the,
story
like, and
attached to
I'm
it.
always like, throw it in the pile. It's fine. Totally fine.
I'll put it in my
It's fine,
basement
it's
with
fine.
all the other haunted things.
Just leave it over there, it's fine.
I seem to attract weird spirits, and, so it's like the first week we're there, I could have sworn I heard a man calling my name, and then again, the neighbors are
Mhm.
not close enough that if somebody's calling somebody, you're gonna hear it like it's in
Right.
your house. It's not like that, and it wasn't Jason. Um, okay, fine. And, another day I'm in the kitchen and there was this room that we wound up using as a dining room right off the kitchen and then a living room right beyond that. But you could see through all three rooms. I'm getting my hair standing up. But anyway, in a bad way. It's daytime and I see this tall man. I could still see his clothing. I could still see he had on like a hat that you would wear to like garden in, walking slowly across the doorway between the kitchen and the dining room. So, like, he was clearly between in the middle room and the 3 rooms. It's daylight. I'm looking like, "Holy crap, is somebody in the house?" And,
Right.
of course, not anybody living. And then at some point, I'm out in the yard and I see him. So, now I'm like, "This is a problem because I Jay and I aren't even comfortable going in the basement together."
Mhm.
So sage didn't work. Lauren Rainbow, the medium, told me to leave a dish of salt in the basement. Did that. It might have seasoned the situation a bit. That's about it. So now, if anybody knows who Christopher Penczak is, he's written a bunch of books on Wicca. And anyway, he's got this protection book, and it's got it had this like CD that came with back in the day. It's on my phone, and it's the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, which is like the big guns of despooking a place. I can't. We must have done it 5 or 6 times. I had burned dragon's blood resin. I'm chiming. We're
Get
salting,
out! Get out!
and it made it better.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it made it all better. And then, of course, we had this crazy flood during, was it Tropical Storm Ida or whatever it was? Flooded the whole basement. The whole basement had to be literally ripped out. Everything, ceiling, walls, floor, everything. So we just gutted it. That got rid of like 96% of the problem. There's probably a little whisper of something, but the new people are super happy there. I think their energy is great, all good. But there are levels
Oh, yeah,
of
and
clearing out a
like,
place.
to what you said, though, like, you're like, "I don't think it's residual." It
I think it
it
knew
could
what
be
it was
both.
doing.
No, but it could be both, right? So you could have
Oh, yeah.
something and then all of this residual energy just sitting on top of it, which, to your point, it's like, buffing out, a scratch. You know what I mean? Like, eventually, you have to get all the way down to it. So you can clear out, you can clear off the residual, and it takes a little time. That's why you don't just sage once. You sage consistently. And sometimes you don't eliminate the original, but because you removed someone is desperate for his attention.
Aw,
I know Finn never does that. Finn's not affectionate at
he's
all.
haunting
He's
you.
not affectionate at all, but he's like, "I see you talking to someone." And
I don't like the topic.
yeah.
I'm trying
No,
to
he's like this.
distract.
"I want you to stop talking about this stuff. It's bad enough I have to live here." Um,
Oh my god.
but they love it here. They love it here. Um, but so you can clear out this residual stuff, but you might not be getting to the core of it. Come here, Finny. You might not be getting
Doing
to
it again.
the core of it. Um, but it might be so small without the residual that you don't really feel. You know what I mean? It's like, the princess, like, what was it? The Princess and the Pea?
I might be the
You're the
princess.
princess. You're the princess. You can feel the pea at the
This
very
ghost
bottom
was like
of
a
the
plate of
mountain.
peas.
Yeah, yeah.
It wasn't
Boulder.
just one.
There's a haunted boulder underneath your mattress.
Oh my god, it
Mhm.
was awful. Like, literally, I was thinking, "Are you kidding me?" Like, but, anyway,
But you're also
I will put
sensitive. You're also sensitive, so
uh,
you would strengthen
possibly.
that. Yeah.
I will put a link to Christopher Penczak's book on protection spells because I have to say, it'll just make you feel better.
I think I have one of his books that you recommended that was for love spells, if I remember.
Oh, that's Barry Dolnick,
Oh,
and that's a
yes.
great book, and
Love
I highly recommend that.
I
That's a
have
whole other
listen, people out there, I'll be casting some love spells. So if you feel
I'll put a link to that one too. That's one of
like
my
I said, if you
favorite books
feel an
to recommend.
undeniable attraction to me, it might be because I put a spell on you.
If you know what? If people really warm up to us that much, I want them to send us chocolate. I realize that no one has sent me any chocolate for the holidays,
Listen, and
and
I want bourbon.
I'm having a crave. You know what? That is the perfect combination.
Chocolate and bourbon is great. Do you know that
We should have a chocolate and bourbon tasting
we
at
went
the
we
museum.
should. In fact,
Ooh,
if
I'd do
you
it.
guys start showing up, and by you guys, you know who I mean everybody out there listening. If you start showing up and start
Leaving
leaving
comments.
comments and start talking to us, we're gonna throw a party at the Paranormal Museum,
Oh, yeah.
and I might have a couple of, you know, bourbons and start telling stories at the museum, which
We're gonna limit you to, like, 2.
honestly, 2 might be too many. I don't drink that much anymore, you know what I mean? And I don't drink that much anymore because I don't have to. It goes right to my head. But,
Oh my goodness.
when I did the Salem event, with Adam in November, which, by the way, you guys get ready for, it's gonna be in November of next year as well.
Ooh,
Um, we did the, Salem, Pirate Museum, which was really it's such a well-presented museum. You really should go.
oh,
And
we
it's
have to go.
it's
I wanna go.
huge, it's huge, and they do a great job telling stories, and they're not really just talking about pirates, like, from a kind of like, "Oh, pirates are cool." They get into the slave trade, they get into, like, lots of really important historical stuff, and I love that, right? So, at the end of it, Adam arranged a rum tasting, and they got this local, distillery, that produced rum, and they had this coffee rum that because rum is good,
Can we get some?
oh my god, it was so good,
Let's
and
do a
it's
tasting.
local to up there. It's local to up there, but it was so good. Like, rum to me is always a little too sweet, but
Yeah, I don't love
this
rum.
I yeah, it's like,
I would try
listen, if
this.
I'm on an island and someone gives me a rum drink, it's like,
Well, that yeah,
that's fine.
well,
But this was like a sipping rum, and it was so delicious. So there you go. So anyone listening, if you're trying to get in my good graces and you desperately want me to, do a love spell on you, coffee,
or a party at Paranormal
or
or
yeah,
some other good venue.
or pretty much if you want to get me to do anything, coffee rum is a good way to go. The address is online. Make sure you pack that properly, wrap it in bubble wrap. It'll be fine. It'll get here. But yeah, we'll do those spells.
100%. So I will put links to the appropriate resources in the show notes. All of this is completely different from the actually very important and somewhat some kind of, I don't know if heartwarming is the right word, but the topic of deathbed visions, which I've been wanting to talk about for a long time. And I'm very curious to see what you think, Kathy, and I'm very curious to see what our listeners think. Um,
I have a
so
can I
yeah,
ask you a question
yeah,
before? So when you say deathbed visions, do you mean people who are dying having visions, or do you mean visions that people have of people who are in the process of dying?
that's a great question. And we could broaden the definition. I was thinking of the visions that are commonly reported by people who are getting closer to death.
Mhm,
And we'll actually talk about whether that means that they're aware they're dying, there is a clear process going on, or whether it's coming and they don't know. Because I have an example.
mhm.
I actually have 2 examples. Um, so without further ado, I'm gonna
We
mouse on.
promise there will be no more a-doing. Go ahead, Trace, I'm sorry.
People are like,
Yeah,
"These
they're
ladies."
like, "Stop it."
So without further ado, deathbed visions, and it's something that, I have wanted to talk about for a while. I don't know how many people know, but, I've worked with people who are very ill, including people who are very close to dying. I've had a number of family members die, and the older you get, the more likely that is. I've been with my pets when they have passed, and, I know, Kath, you have too. So but I think that generally people avoid the topic, and a lot of people avoid being with people when they're getting toward the end of their lives. And a common thing that we do, and you'll see as we go along why that might not be the best option, is, especially in the West, we tend to tell people that if they report seeing a departed loved one as they are getting closer to their own passing, we tell them they're hallucinating or no, so and so's passed, or you must be misseeing this, or, maybe it's their medication. But deathbed visions are extraordinarily common. There's a range of reported percentages, about how common it is. The lowest would be like 30% maybe. But when you look at data from hospices where, somebody goes before they pass on and they're attended to more than you might imagine, people commonly report to staff and to loved ones that they see people who passed on waiting for them. And it's universally pretty comforting. So, what inspired me to talk about this today, other than an interest, is the book Visions, Trips, and Crowded Rooms: Who and What You See Before You Die. It's a book by David Kessler. I mean, it's a really popular book. It's got a ton of reviews. But a little quick background on him. David Kessler is a nurse by training, and he currently runs an end of life unit at a major Los Angeles hospital. But he'd also been in his career a police officer, a member of the Red Cross disaster team, and a pilot. And it sounds very,
He's
you know,
a big underachiever.
yeah.
Yeah,
But these are all things where you would be dealing with life or death
right.
situations and things that challenge our normal kind of experience of life. I'm thinking even being a pilot, like, to some
Yeah.
extent, you must be thinking of your own mortality more than the average person, I would
Mhm.
think. Um, but he's been fascinated by what happens to us when we die since he was a child. When he was 12, his mother, who had been really seriously ill for a long time, he doesn't say with what, but when he was 12, his mother passed. And, and back in the day, you weren't really allowed, if you were a child, you weren't allowed to be with the
Mhm.
person when they were in the hospital. I mean, it was like you really kept so separate from it. But this was obviously a lot for him to hold. And then I think when he was in his 20s, I might be getting this wrong, but he wasn't that old. He might have been a college student when his father also got sick and was dying. And now it's just the two of them in the family.
Right.
So you can imagine how this must have felt. And I guess he said in the weeks leading up to his father's death, he knew he was very ill. He was extraordinarily anxious. He was sad. He said, "I don't want to leave you. I don't want to leave my life." But then one day, as he got much closer to passing, he perked up and he suddenly seemed optimistic. And he told his son, the author, "Your mother came to see me
Mm.
last night," and he became peaceful. And, what he said to his son is that he was in an okay place. And he said, "Mom and I will be waiting for you."
Right.
And then he passed a few days later. But one of the things that comes through again and again, because in the book, David Kessler is interviewing people from all walks of life, sharing their stories about being with people as they've gotten close to passing and what they've reported. And it's just so universal again and again and again, really similar. But again, about 88%, 90% of people supposedly have deathbed visions when it's their time. So I wanted to kind of share with you some common themes, jump in at any point, but some common themes that arose in the book, and there are things that I had been familiar with, but people tend to see loved ones, so spouses, if there are children who've gone on before them, other family members, friends, sometimes religious figures like Jesus. Now, what's interesting is that basically, if you're a Christian, you're going to probably see Jesus or Mary, another Christian figure. If you're Jewish, you are not seeing them. If you're a Buddhist, you are seeing that is not your experience. So the experience tends to be tailored to you and what would
Do you
be.
think that that's more like because of how people are interpreting it? So they see something, and it's not necessarily, like Da Vinci's Jesus, that they're seeing something and it's evoking a feeling from them. And and therefore they're like that feeling is the feeling of God or the feeling of Jesus. And therefore it becomes, you know, like it's not like Jesus shows up for you and Buddha shows up for you. It's just that this sense shows up and you then interpret it through the language and the belief system that you have.
So that's a great question. And if I'm thinking like a social scientist, that would make the most sense. that our brains and our experience base will filter any experience we have and interpret according to our own lens. But that said, I don't know. I mean, it kind of makes sense that if there is a sense of the divine and that we each have our different understanding, or there are different aspects of the divine or ascended masters or whatever, that part of that divine, I don't know, order or whatever would be that you get greeted by the figure that would mean the most to you and be the most comforting. I mean, it's just along those lines. It's why I'm not seeing the cousin of somebody who lives down the street that I don't know unless there's some relevance to me. I'm probably going to see my own family. You know what I mean? Because
Well, I mean,
there's that cord
I
that
would
there.
think though that the people that are around you would be yours. I'm just,
Right.
I mean, and then it comes down to like, it comes down to a very specific question of, is this external from you or is this a universal experience? So like, is it God showing up to greet you, or is it the veil thinning and you becoming more aware of a different environment surrounding you and then interpreting it? Which,
No one
I don't
knows.
know. Yeah, I mean, I guess we don't.
Yeah. I mean, I know one way to find out, but you know, reporting from this side of the veil, I can only say what dying people have reported to living people. I mean, yes and no. I mean, I think there are people who have had like Scott Thompson, who came on my other podcast, who's amazing, but his all of his work is on the shared death experience. Just as an aside, that came about because his girlfriend and her son were killed in a tragic accident. I mean, the son was in the hospital and died a few days later, but the girlfriend was killed instantly. And when the little boy was dying, he and a whole bunch of other relatives were in the room, and he had a transpersonal experience where he experienced his deceased girlfriend coming back to get her son
Mhm.
at this incredible light. And he traveled part of the way with them wherever they were going. I mean, like, I hate to put labels like heaven or this or that, because, I mean, I think it's more than we can put a label on, but, um, yeah, so I do think there are mediums too who see people when they leave their bodies and so forth, but I think there's a limit to what we can perceive usually. So I
Okay.
think it's hard to really verify, you know what I'm saying, beyond what somebody shares.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, other things that are very commonly reported, feeling of being like the dying person reporting that they're about to go on a trip and using a lot of language that's about going on a trip. It's also frequently reported that people see a crowded room. So sometimes people just see one person or one religious figure. They'll say they saw, again, Jesus or an angel, or their spouse. But other times people report a ton of people in the room. The people who are with the dying person, this is a very common observation. I saw this with my own grandmother, actually, that kind of trying to sit up and reach
Mhm.
for somebody. It's depicted in movies and books as well, but they're seeing somebody that we can't
Right.
usually, and literally reaching for them.
Right.
Um, Even if they've been unable to sit up or reach for them to that point, which I find so fascinating. Often the person, even if this is days before or weeks before, they will describe the spirits of loved ones as being kind of like floating,
Mhm.
and you'll see them looking up. So, like, as if somebody was several feet above the floor.
Right.
And often they'll describe people as looking this I've heard a ton. The loved ones who come back look young, not just healthy, but like a person dying at 80 might come back looking like they're in their 30s or
Right.
40s.
Mhm.
Yeah, and you know that, but again, enveloped in light. And then again, just to clarify, this is not the same as someone who has a near-death experience where they may also experience loved ones in spirit and this incredible transpersonal kind of landscape. It's a bit different because these people are actually dying, not having a near-death experience and coming back. So, other common features: losing fear of death, but losing fear generally, losing anger, about the process or their situation or people they know in life, a greater sense of peace. This is also very common. And this happens with animals too, Kathy. And I don't know if you remember this. I don't know if you've observed this, but where the pet even or a person who's about to pass, they might be like almost unresponsive or barely moving a lot or communicating. And then in the days right before or shortly before they rally, so they'll eat a little bit or they're
Yeah.
talking more, they seem more lucid.
Mhm.
It's called terminal
Yeah.
lucidity, happier. So I wanted to just share that because it's so common, but a lot of people feel like if you talk about it, you're crazy, right?
Right.
Or the scientific view is that like it's the product of a dying brain and that we're wired for this to make the process easier. And certainly that's possible. Although sometimes people come and say things that they wouldn't have access to
I
knowing
have to say this though,
otherwise.
like, I've
Yeah,
always questioned that. This whole idea, well, that happens because of this, like, well, that happens because it makes things easier. Well, who is deciding that? Who has decided to make things easier? You know what I mean?
yeah,
I get it. I get it when you have a snake that bites a rabbit and puts in an anesthetic. You know what I mean? Like so the rabbit just kind of stops fighting. I get that, right? Because the end result is the snake is gonna get to eat. I
mm,
understand that. That I get. But what does nature care? That
I don't
someone
know.
who is dying and when we're talking about deathbed, we're not talking about people who are getting hit by a car having a premonition. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about someone that's walking down the street and unfortunately is gonna be, the victim of a violent crime or something like that, seeing someone in it, and that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about
Although that might
right,
happen,
but that's not a
right,
deathbed.
not in the way we're
Right,
talking
that's not
about it right
that
now.
and that to me would be premonitory, right?
Mhm.
Whereas this is you are slow your body is dying. And to me, that would be your spirit is ascending to you through your consciousness, right? So it you are literally becoming spirit because your body is dying, and so you have this kind of the veil. We refer to it as the veil, but whatever it is that physicality prevents us from experiencing these non-corporeal visions, that's going away, and you are becoming spirit, which to me would be one of the reasons why you're able to do that.
Yeah,
But when people make the argument that, oh, this is universal because it's the brain's way of it's the brain's way of what? You know what I mean? What does the brain care? Like, so to me, like that makes less sense to me. And it also absolutely implies, it implies a clockmaker, right? It implies an engineer. It implies a power that is saying, I need to make this easier on them, so I'm going to put that in there. Like that argument to me is always it always rings false, because it's almost like you're stating that there is essentially a higher power that is making these determinations by creating this physicality in us, but then you're unwilling to acknowledge this higher power except to say that it did this. You know what I mean? Like I always find that argument to be specious. It sounds good, but when
yeah.
you start to really deep dig into it, it doesn't seem to be saying what it's saying.
Well, like anything about us, right? Like, why are we, and people can say with a lot of how humans have developed, like there'd be an evolutionary advantage and that you'd be more likely to reproduce, live long enough to reproduce with certain, why do we have eyes in the front of our heads? You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
instead of on the sides or whatever. But the point I think you're making is that this doesn't even have anything to do
Exactly.
with our ability to just
There doesn't
reproduce
seem to be any evolutionary reason for that. There seems to be
other than to
a
just to
kindness.
make us comfort.
Right.
Yeah,
There seems to be a kindness, but then that would imply someone designing it for kindness. You know what I mean?
right,
Like, "Oh,
right.
once they get there, I'm gonna make it easy on them." Well,
Yeah,
who's making that decision? That's what I mean by that argument,
yeah.
you know?
No, that makes sense. You said something else too a few minutes ago, and I just wanna kind of this kind of popped in my head, and if you're out there and you do energy work or you've had these experiences, please let us know because I think this is more common than people think, and I'll tell you what I mean. So, like, I not all the time, but a lot of times when something is different about somebody's energy, for whatever reason, I can see it.
Mhm,
And it's not like the diagrams of auras where it's this, technicolor, clearly defined thing. That's just, but like it's like an energy pattern that can be more or less particulate and more or less orderly or more or less visible
mhm,
to me. And what I've noticed is that with people and with pets, before it's clear that they are ill, that pattern starts to become much more visible and a little more like little more like the particles seem more defined to me,
mhm,
but in a specific way, and I can't articulate it well. I mean, this happened with my cat Sebastian, where, like I was saying, for like a week or two, I was like, his energy field, I can really see it when I look at him versus the other pets. And Jay always is like, don't say that. And he's fine.
mhm.
And then, of course, he got very ill. And within 2 days, that was it, and we had no idea. But the energy field changes. With my grandmother in the last year, I remember just thinking, her energy field looks different. And she felt great and she was still doing her thing, and I don't wanna scare anybody because I just won't, like, go around telling people, like it's like my mother with the dreams
Yeah, yeah,
of
yeah.
people getting in the car,
By the way, your
Anyway,
energy field is looking pretty
you might wanna go get that checked out.
I'm not
And it could just be you don't feel great today,
yeah,
or I don't really know, I
I
don't know what
guess
it is.
Tracy says your energy field is looking negative.
Don't invite her over.
Mhm. Don't like that, Tracy.
No, but, like, and the reason I'm bringing that up is not like, "Oh, hope she doesn't look at my energy field." It's because, um I have, every once in a while, I don't do Reiki often. I don't do it for pay. I rarely do it. I wouldn't go, I'm a Reiki master. I know people do that and that's their identity. They've spent a lot more time doing it. Those are the people you should go to, not me. But every once in a while, somebody will be like, so and so is not doing well. Can you send them energy? And I'll sit and do it. But what I've noticed is, it, like, as I tune in, I can usually feel what's going on in their bodies and sometimes just what's going on for them or where they are or whatever. I mean, in a weird way, like in a kind of an uncanny way, but you can feel like if you go by energy centers, like one by one, a feeling of greater connection or less connection in
Right.
them. I'm actually, if it's okay, I'm going to tell you a story where I wasn't the person looking and doing that, but this is a deathbed visitation story as well. Let me just kind of share it and see what you think. So, I'm gonna call this friend of mine Mary. That's not her name, and she passed away quite a while ago. Um, I had a few years where there were a few people who were, getting sick, and some of them passed away. But anyway, this person I had known for a long time, and I'll call her Mary. She was dying, and of more than one very serious thing. And she wasn't 50 yet. And she was in hospice for quite a while. She looked so bad that everybody thought she would go months before she did, and I think that would have been merciful
Mhm.
because, I mean, you and I both know how things can get bad.
Yeah,
So it was an unfortunately protracted process, but I think, someone I'll tell you what happened because later in a moment, because I think she wasn't ready to go,
right.
and I think she held on even though I could not figure out how
She was doing
her
it.
spirit could stay in that body, honestly. So,
Sheer will.
it literally, that was it, because at this point, she couldn't really eat. There was nothing they could do for her. Even the comfort care wasn't doing a lot, and so this is months of this. So I would go take the subway and go see her, and she was a very religious person. I'm not sure if I would call her very spiritual,
Right.
because that's a whole other thing to
Yeah,
me,
no,
but
I agree. It's different. You can be both, but you can be
you
one or
can.
the other. Yeah. Mhm.
Super observant,
Right,
a good person. I'm saying according to, like, all the definitions of what you should be.
right.
She had a child, she had a son, and I think, understandably, she was extremely worried about leaving him. So now, like, it's I'm gonna say in the last month, and I go up to visit, and there's another friend visiting and kinda sitting in the corner. This is a living person, not a spirit. So, my friend Mary is talking to me, and, I'm just kinda letting her talk, and all of a sudden, she says to me, this is gonna be a little bit of a personal disclosure story, because she looks at me and she said, "Who is that little boy?" And I'm like, "What little boy?" And she's like, "I see a little boy next to you. I see a little boy next to you." And I'm thinking, like, I'm just, I switched into psychology mode. I'm like, "Well, who do you think it is?" She's like, "I don't know. I don't know who it is." Now, the context here is that I had had a series of miscarriages, and I had one that had gone a little farther, and, we had started thinking about him as a person, and
I remember.
for y yes, and for years, various psychics or mediums, like, if I met them or whatever, if I was getting a reading spontaneously, I'd be asking about, like, my, like, job or something, and they'd spontaneously come up with, there's a little boy spirit around you, and, he's really trying to come to you." And I honestly wasn't ready. Fast forward, we were trying, and it just didn't work out, but the point is, I had been thinking of him as a person, as my son. So now it's probably like 2 or 3 years later, and I think, I asked her, and her brain wasn't working perfectly, but I don't think this was a hallucination. I don't know. And I said, "I'm wondering if it could be my son."
Mhm.
And I think the reason I don't know if she was really seeing, I don't know if it was an artifact of being very ill or if she was seeing a spirit. I don't know if the spirit was there for me, but I thought it's interesting that, I was in constant contact with other people who were spending time with her. And to my knowledge, she hadn't brought up other visitations.
Right,
But I think the relevance of this is that she wanted me to make sure that I looked after her
right,
son, and I did for years.
right,
We've kind of lost touch, and I think that sometimes relationships go through their ebb and flow, but I think, like, I felt like there was meaning to that
right,
I will take care of your son
right,
if you
right,
will
right,
take
right.
care of mine.
Mhm, mhm.
And listen, it could, who knows? But, so over the next month, she's, again, just barely hanging in there. I had a conference that I had agreed to go to months before, not knowing any of this was gonna be where it was.
Right,
And I told her husband that I'd be out of town for, I think it was like a week or something, or, several days. I saw her right before. I didn't think she'd last much longer. She'd been okay with me doing energy work on her when I was visiting her, so I knew she would probably be okay with this. She wasn't really that responsive anymore. And so while I was away, I phoned a Reiki master that I knew who does distance healing, and I asked her to work on her. I just said, like, "I just want her to be comfortable. I can't believe she's still in that body."
right.
And so she worked on her, and she got back to me afterwards, and she said, "Yeah, the reason she's still in that body is she's afraid." And I just thought, this is the most religiously observant person I know,
Mhm.
literally. And I'm like, "What is she afraid of?" She said she's afraid of being judged, like, when she passes.
Yeah.
Like, this all this, and it's so funny because a lot of times it's the people who probably aren't gonna be in trouble when they cross over. Um, but again, there's this fear installed sometimes that God is judgmental and punitive,
Well, I
and
think if you follow a lot of the Western Europe, the Western civilization religions, it is a fear model. I mean, that's the model of
yeah.
it, like, I mean, even Santa Claus, he knows if you've been good, he knows if he's keeping a list. We've got this. When I was a kid, I used to think of our soul, right? And I would think the soul was like a blank of your body, and then whenever you did something bad, God had a Sharpie, and he
Oh,
would
good lord.
fill in the black, like, that would be it, like, that
Like, write it
something
down.
bad, right, and he might erase it too, but it would, like, start at your toe, and then, you could get filled up, and I remember visualizing, like, I think I'm bad up to my knee. You know what I mean? Like, what'll I
Oh
do
my
if
god.
I remember being that way. But I mean, that's structural religion. like in our part of the world. That's, so it's like
Like,
you could be great, but,
maybe you had a bad thought
or
or
or maybe there's
mhm,
something you forgot you did. You know what I mean? Is there something I did that, I didn't repent and it's still sitting there in the back? I mean, it's
or the
guilt-based.
hate in your heart
Yeah,
or,
it's
like, all
guilt-based.
the things people worry about.
Everything's guilt-based.
What's so interesting about that is that this was the first time she told me about this, and since I have paid attention if I've worked on anybody who's close to the end of their life, but, and again, I don't do it that often, but she said, "I worked on each energy center, and there is a way in Reiki, I guess, that you can help somebody kind of like I guess the energy centers let go in order.
Mhm.
So, like, maybe root up to crown."
Right.
And she just said, I just reassured her that God is loving and you're gonna be okay, and she did. She passed, like, that night or the next morning. So my hair's standing up.
Mm,
Ooh, like, because it was, like, so powerful, and I'm just thinking I understand staying because you're worried about your child, and I've had another friend who really had a hard time with that, and I get it, I can imagine, but I had no idea. We'd never talked about it that she was worried about what would happen to her.
repercussions, yeah.
So, yeah, it was just fascinating. Like, there's this whole other world, and it seems like while we're so attached to our bodies, it is harder to see it, and it's like you were
Yeah,
saying before,
yeah.
the more we start to let go, the more visible all kinds of stuff is.
Yeah, and I mean, I will tell you, I sat with my father the night, as he was dying. I have 7 brothers and sisters, and my sisters had done the heavy lifting up until that time, so I sat with him that night, and, something happened while I was with him that night, and a couple of things happened. One is just really, really personal, and, just out of respect to him, I won't
Yeah.
say it,
Yeah,
but,
of course.
um my father had immigrated to the United States in 1957 and had left pretty much, his entire world behind him in Ireland. And he had been his mother had died in 1987. My father died in 1997, so he only lived 10 years past his mother. And I remember being there with him, and he was laying in the hospital bed in our dining room in the house that I grew up in, and he started to see people, and he started to see them come in the room, and it was more than one, and he would greet them as they came in, but he would greet them with this surprise, where he would say, "Oh, Richard, what are you doing here?" And that was his uncle Richard, who had died, I want to say maybe 5 years before him, who was the man that had raised him. And
Oh, wow.
he had a sibling, Alice, who had passed away when he was 14. And he said, "Oh, Alice," like, and it was very like, uh, conversational and like, "Oh, it's so nice to see you." And I will say this, my father was on massive doses of it wasn't pain medication at this point. It was stuff that was almost hallucinogenic. But my father had never said these names to in my life. I'd never heard my father refer to them. And the fact that he didn't say, "Oh, Elvis, what are you doing here?" Or, or Una, which is my mother's name. "What are you doing here?" He only referenced people
Who
who
had
were important
passed.
to him who had passed. And, you know, you could not be in that room that night and not know that this was his last night on earth. Like, you simply couldn't. It was so obvious. And it was, when I think back on it, it's almost 30 years now, but when I think back on it, it was the single most transformative thing that had ever happened to me at that point. It was I can't even. There was me before that, and there was me after that, and I wasn't the same person after he passed away, because my father was the first person that I knew that had died. And because we were the only ones in this country, so we didn't have. I didn't know my grandparents. I didn't know aunts and uncles and whatnot. They hadn't. I hadn't experienced that. So when my father died, it was absolutely, earth-shattering. I there's no preparation. There's nothing that prepares you for it, and, but I remember sitting with him, and I remember being like, "This is im like, this is happening, and it's important." And, he died, like, 10 hours afterwards, but, um, I do remember being, like, really having this sense that they were in the room, and not necessarily because I felt them in the room, but because his, uh, just his just his being, um, his being just it changed when they walked in. His sense of wonder and his sense of, he was very uncomfortable. He had a very difficult death. He did not go easy, and he did not want to go. And so when they walked in, and he just, "Oh, Richard, what are you doing here?" It was like this, like, "Oh, I'm so nice to see you." Like there was this sense of, wonder that I believed, to this day, I believed it. In a lot of ways, I think that's what started me on my journey of the different things that I was interested in. Um, and a lot of it is because I had such faith in that moment of what he was experiencing, that even though the devastation afterwards, kind of overshadowed that for years. When I think back to those moments of wonder, I really remember how truthful and real it felt, and just I remember how real it looked for him, So I have a lot of faith in that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, thank you for sharing that,
Yeah,
Kathy, because it's not
I don't think
something
I've ever
we've
told you that before.
no, you never told me. I mean, God, we've known each other for what, 20
Yeah,
years?
yeah,
And it's just funny, because it's like we talk about everything
right.
and we're not afraid to talk about intense stuff, but like, there's not only so much out there, but there's so much
Oh,
in each of us.
and, when I talk about that, it was probably 6 minutes. The whole experience was this tiny thing, but it was huge. It was just very important, and, um, and I do think it's a lot of times when we talk about deathbed, visions and deathbed, visitations and things like that, a lot of it is the interpretation of the person seeing it. So you're talking to the person who's passing, who's in the process of dying. I mean, my father was in the process of dying at that time. Um, but so he wasn't telling me, "Oh, I'm seeing Richard." He was talking to Richard, and I happened to be a witness to this. And I think that's how we get a lot of the data that we get.
Oh,
And
yeah.
when you see it, you know, he didn't, you know, he could have, if it was a hallucination, he could have hallucinated anyone.
Yeah.
Why did he exclusively hallucinate his loved ones who had passed over? Like my father was unbelievably close to my younger sister. Like they were soulmates. I should say they are soulmates. He didn't call her. Like that's who. Yeah, you know what I mean. So there was something very honest and very like there. I had no doubt in my mind what I was seeing. I didn't I didn't know it. I hadn't gone through the process of, but there was no doubt in my mind that what I was watching was legitimately happening, and that he was legitimately having those experiences. And it is what kind of tumbled me into this field of trying to understand that, and not necessarily to prove it, because I don't care about proving
Yeah.
it. You know what I mean? Like to me, it's already there. I just want to understand it. I want to learn about it. And but like in hearing you talk about it, it made me remember what a profound experience that was, and it really
God.
was. It really was profound.
Oh, I mean, it sounds like it, Kathy. And I'm hesitant to even say anything after that
Oh
because
no,
it's like,
sorry.
no, no. I mean, it's so moving and so deeply personal. I mean, just It's interesting because I don't I don't know what else your father might have talked about. I think a lot of times when we're so in our own grief, it's hard to even remember everything because 'cause we're in this, like, this altered state ourselves, but I've even, heard of people mentioning deceased loved ones coming to greet them and take them to the other side when no one knew the person had passed,
Right.
and
Mhm.
so I think there's so much that comes up for people, and again, we're in such a state,
Right.
there's so much to process, but, I'm going out on a limb, like, I can see why people make arguments for a biological basis for this, and look, we could be wired to be able to perceive things biologically as well as spiritually. I don't think we have to
Right, it doesn't have to be one or the
pick
other.
a side, but I do think it's real. I think, you hear reports of things like what you're describing, people who have brains that are perfectly fine and when they're dying, and people whose brains are not, people who are on medications and people who aren't. And I'm okay with just going with it. And maybe I'll save this one for another episode. But I was even thinking about with my own grandfather's passing, like he, I think things were changing, and again, I'll talk about it more in another episode. But I think he was already starting to get an idea, and maybe somebody was coming and helping him get that idea, even though he wasn't on his deathbed
Oh,
the day
yeah, no, I
before,
think that I definitely think that happens. Yeah.
like
Mhm. Oh,
messengers,
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
Mhm. Mhm.
Maybe the last thing I'll leave you with, and I won't go into the big story here either, but just to end on a little bit of a humorous note, when my grandmother in her last year, I think she was actually supposed to go probably a year earlier, and I think with modern medicine, we can put that off, and that is what happened. And she would tell my mother, because she was living with my parents at the time, that my grandfather had popped in, or like my grandfather was, and she was completely of sound mind,
Right.
and that, she would tell him, "Barney, I'm not ready."
Not coming yet.
And she had to
Save
do
a
this
seat, but I'm
multiple
not coming yet.
times over the years. She's like, "Get out. Come back later."
Yeah, yeah.
But Kath, so good to see
Good to
you.
see you.
I thank you for creating space for me to talk about this, kind of serious
Yeah,
subject.
yeah.
And I know you and I like crack jokes because that's what we do, but we also know how serious and profound this is. And I really do hope people will share their experiences with us, share what you think. You don't even have to agree with us, but definitely if you have stories that have really moved you involving your own loved ones, please do share it. We mean it when we say leave us a comment,
Right.
send us an email, and so forth.
There's
Yeah.
something, I think there's something important about sharing your stories too, right? So, it's yes, hold them to you, make them important, but you know, sharing your stories helps you I think hold on to the reality of them. You know what I mean? Like when you put them out there, first of all, it's a safe space to put them out there, but second of all, it's like, this is a place where these stories resonate with other people, and it's like, you tell a story and then someone is like, that is something similar that happened to me. You start to realize, like, it wasn't this, like, you know, it wasn't something I manufactured. It wasn't something that I misunderstood or misinterpreted. It's an experience that human beings have, and I think that sharing those experiences I think that that's important. I think it's important not just to listen to other people's stories. I think it's important to share your own stories. And you guys, we want you to share your stories with us.
Yeah, please do.
We really want that. We want this to be a conversation, not a lecture.
100%. And remember, hit that like button, share, give us a follow.
Yeah, make sure you follow. Make sure you follow. We really appreciate that.
All right, Kath. Well, so great to see
Good
you.
to see you.
And everyone, of course, until next time, stay curious.
Keep exploring.
Bye for now.
Ciao.